Akina Jabari moved through Grandview's gleaming halls like a ghost, her quiet demeanor often mistaken for timidity. Just a month into this prestigious hospital, her seasoned eyes saw much, but her voice rarely broke the surface of the demanding, hierarchical environment. Today, however, silence shattered. A piercing alarm tore through the ICU. Sergeant Kaelen Nez, a young veteran recently paralyzed, was fighting for every breath, his chest heaving uselessly, his eyes wide with silent terror. Dr. Santiago Ramirez, the chief surgeon, burst in, followed by Dr. Ingrid Kjellberg, head of neurology, their confident strides radiating authority. They took command, barking orders, their attention fixed on the monitor's plunging numbers. Akina, watching from the periphery, felt a familiar, sickening dread, mixed with the sting of being completely overlooked. Her subtle insights, her gut feeling that this was different, were dismissed before they could even form words. Kaelen's struggles intensified, his face turning an alarming blue. The top doctors, initially so sure, now exchanged glances of growing bewilderment. But Akina knew. A flicker of recognition sparked in her, a terrifying echo from a forgotten past, promising that only she could pull him back from the brink. The piercing alarm had subsided, replaced by a frantic symphony of hurried footsteps, hushed commands, and the rhythmic, urgent hiss of the ventilator struggling to aid Sergeant Kaelen Nez. He lay amidst a tangle of wires and tubes, his chest still battling for air, his skin taking on a waxy pallor that sent a cold dread through Akina. Dr. Ramirez, his brow furrowed in concentration, now leaned over Kaelen, directing a resident to adjust the ventilator settings, while Dr. Kjellberg, her gaze sharp, scrutinized neurological readouts on a nearby monitor. They were a formidable pair, their combined expertise vast, their confidence usually unshakable. Yet, even they carried a faint tremor of bewilderment now. Akina, a ghost in the bustling room, watched. Her eyes, trained in shadows and hushed urgency, picked up details others missed, details that hummed with a terrifying familiarity. Kaelen's breathing, though assisted, held a peculiar, raspy quality, a subtle hitch that wasn't typical of the systemic failure the doctors suspected. And then she saw it, a fleeting, almost imperceptible tremor at the base of his throat, a minute vibration of his vocal cords visible only in the subtle ripple of skin. It wasn't the kind of tremor one found in textbooks describing stroke or cardiac arrest. It was something else entirely. A knot tightened in Akina's stomach. Her mind, usually so disciplined, flashed with images of dusty, makeshift clinics and the desperate, gurgling breaths of patients exposed to rare, insidious nerve agents in forgotten conflict zones. The symptoms were a cruel mimic, paralyzing but leaving standard neurological tests bafflingly normal, eventually constricting the airway in a very specific, dangerous way. The traditional intubation Ramirez was contemplating wouldn't just be ineffective, it could cause irreversible damage. His vocal cords, Akina murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the low thrum of machines. She hadn't meant to speak aloud, the words escaping her lips like a nervous sigh. Ramirez paused, turning slowly. His gaze, usually sweeping and commanding, narrowed upon Akina, taking in her small stature and junior nurse scrubs. "Nurse Jabari," he asked, his tone laced with a dismissive weariness. "Are you seeing something we're not?" The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. "Of course, you're not." Akina felt a flush creep up her neck. The hierarchical chasm between them was vast, Grandview's unwritten rules as rigid as its gleaming steel. "It's just, the tremor," she stammered, gesturing vaguely towards Kaelen's throat. "It seems unusual. And the breath sounds." Kjellberg, who had been reviewing Kaelen's latest MRI, scoffed softly without looking up. "Nurse, we have excellent imaging. No laryngeal trauma, no neurological explanation for vocal cord involvement. This is systemic, likely post-surgical complications exacerbating underlying conditions. Focus on maintaining vital signs." Her voice, though calm, was a steel wall. Akina shrank back, a wave of humiliation washing over her. She knew how she must sound, an inexperienced rookie contradicting two titans of medicine. But the image of Kaelen's struggling face, the unique, terrifying tremor, burned in her mind. This wasn't standard. This wasn't in their textbooks. It was in hers, etched by harsh, unforgiving experience. Her gut screamed at her, a silent, insistent alarm, louder than any hospital monitor. Despite their interventions, Kaelen's condition continued its terrifying slide. His oxygen saturation dipped, then rallied weakly, then dipped again. Dr. Ramirez called for a different medication, while Dr. Kjellberg ordered more extensive blood work, their faces etched with increasing frustration. They were following every protocol, exhausting every conventional explanation, but Kaelen was slipping away. Akina watched, her internal conflict raging. Was she truly just a rookie, blinded by an overactive imagination, or was she holding a vital, terrible truth that no one would believe? The tension in the room thickened, a suffocating blanket of professional bewilderment and Akina's quiet, growing desperation. Kaelen's life hung by a thread, and Akina, isolated and dismissed, felt the weight of it crushing her. The air in Kaelen's room grew thick, not just with the scent of antiseptic and fear, but with a palpable tension that hummed beneath the sterile quiet. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor, once a steady reassurance, now felt like a frantic countdown. Kaelen's breaths became shallower, each exhalation a painful sigh, each inhalation a strained gasp that pulled at his ribs. His skin, already pale, took on a faint, alarming blueness around his lips. Dr. Ramirez, his brow furrowed in a mask of professional frustration, adjusted Kaelen's oxygen mask with an almost violent precision. Increase ventilation support. He's failing to compensate. Dr. Kjellberg, eyes glued to the neurological readouts, shook her head. No new signs of cerebral edema. The brain activity is stable for his condition. This is systemic. They were trapped in a medical echo chamber, each new test reinforcing their initial, flawed conclusion. Systemic failure. A body shutting down. But Akina knew better. She moved closer, her heart hammering against her ribs, her gaze locked on Kaelen's throat. There it was again, a subtle, barely perceptible tremor in the muscle, a slight, involuntary constriction that no textbook would mention, but which screamed volumes to her. It was the precursor to a laryngeal spasm, a silent, deadly trap, the hallmark of the very specific neurotoxin she'd encountered once, in another lifetime, half a world away. A standard intubation, forced against that spasm, would not only fail but cause irreparable damage, effectively sealing Kaelen's fate. Akina's breath hitched. They were going to intubate him. And they were going to do it wrong. Doctor, she began, her voice a small, almost reedy sound against the rising crescendo of alarms, I think. I've observed something in the vocal cords. A specific constriction, almost like a spasm. If we approach with standard intubation, there's a risk of severe trauma. She felt the weight of their gazes, sharp and dismissive. Ramirez paused, turning slowly from the monitor, his expression tightening into a grimace of impatience. Nurse Jabari, with all due respect, we are managing a complex respiratory collapse. This is not a pathology lecture. We need to secure his airway, and quickly. His tone was clipped, a warning to stay in her lane. Kjellberg chimed in, more gently but no less firm. Nurse, vocal cord spasms are rare in this context, and typically present with stridor. We are looking at a generalized respiratory depression, likely from central nervous system compromise. We need to focus on supporting his breathing, not chasing anecdotal observations. Akina felt her cheeks flush with humiliation, but the image of Kaelen's struggle, the faint blue on his lips, extinguished it instantly. But if it's not generalized, if it's a localized spasm, standard methods could actually worsen it. We need a different approach, a slower, more controlled intubation, perhaps using a smaller tube, and specific muscle relaxants to avoid trauma to the cord itself. Her words tumbled out, desperate, urgent. Ramirez let out a short, disbelieving laugh, a harsh sound in the increasingly tense room. Nurse Jabari, you've been with us for a month. A month. Are you suggesting you possess some advanced insight into neurological and pulmonary emergencies that two board-certified specialists do not? This is a textbook systemic collapse. He gestured to the monitors, which were now flashing multiple red warnings. We don't have time for your anecdotal observations or your theories. Prepare for standard intubation, now. The words felt like a physical blow. Akina recoiled, her carefully constructed composure fracturing. She was a rookie. She was just a nurse. She was an unproven nobody in this gleaming, high-stakes arena. Her field experience, her hard-won knowledge from the stark, brutal realities of conflict zones, meant nothing here. It was unheard of, unimaginable, to challenge such titans of medicine. But Kaelen was dying. The monitors began to shriek in earnest. Kaelen's chest ceased its agonizing rise and fall. His oxygen saturation plummeted, his heart rate spiking then dipping dangerously low. A flurry of desperate activity erupted around his bed. Nurses rushed for emergency equipment, doctors barked orders, their faces suddenly etched with a raw, undeniable panic that mirrored Akina's own. "He's arresting!" Someone shouted. Akina watched, paralyzed by the chaos, by the horrifying certainty that their standard approach would kill him, by the crushing weight of her silence. Her warnings, her gut, her vital, terrible truth, had been dismissed. And now, Kaelen Nez, a man who had faced death on foreign battlefields, was about to meet it here, in the sterile, uncomprehending embrace of Grandview Medical Center. The fear was a cold, sharp blade, twisting in her gut. She had to do something. Anything. Just like Akina, have you ever felt overlooked, your ideas dismissed? This feeling of being an underdog, fighting for what you believe in, is something many of us can deeply relate to. If you're drawn to stories of quiet bravery and hidden strengths, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Join our global community of story lovers who champion the underestimated and celebrate the extraordinary. Your support helps us bring more compelling narratives and better content to you. Be part of something special, where every voice matters. Thank you for being here with us. The chaos was a maelstrom. Doctors and nurses swarmed Kaelen's bed, a frantic ballet of desperate hands and shouted commands. Dr. Ramirez, his face usually a mask of controlled authority, was now creased with genuine alarm, his orders rapid-fire but increasingly scattered. Dr. Kjellberg, eyes wide and clinical, barked about neurology protocols, even as the patient's vital signs screamed a different story. The monitors shrieked an incessant, piercing alarm, a flatline's prelude. Kaelen Nez, the quiet warrior, was slipping away, right there, in the heart of Grandview's supposed excellence. Akina stood frozen for a beat, the cold blade of fear twisting deeper in her gut. She had known this would happen. Her silence, her adherence to the invisible hierarchy, had condemned him. The bitter taste of professional humility was nothing compared to the crushing weight of knowing she possessed the solution, yet remained voiceless. This was the ultimate failure, not of Grandview, but of her. Then, amidst the din, Akina's gaze locked with Kaelen's. His eyes, though unfocused and distant, seemed to search, to find hers through the frantic flurry of activity. His lips, bluish and barely parting, moved. No sound escaped them that others could hear over the alarms and the frantic shouting, but Akina saw it. She felt it. The almost imperceptible shaping of his mouth, the ghost of a breath that carried a single, desperate, validating word, Sergeant. It was a whisper only she could hear, a phantom echo from a life she had tried to bury. But it wasn't just a word, it was a connection, a call from one soldier to another. It was a plea, and a recognition. In that instant, Akina's fear didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became a molten core of resolve, burning away the last vestiges of her rookie deference, her quiet resignation. Kaelen wasn't just a patient anymore, he was a comrade, entrusting her with his life, just as soldiers had done in the field. The hierarchy of Grandview, the arrogance of her superiors, the looming threat of professional ruin, none of it mattered now. Only Kaelen's life. A new voice, steady and shockingly clear, cut through the escalating panic. Stop. You're going to kill him. Every head snapped towards Akina. Dr. Ramirez's face, already flushed with exertion, turned a deeper crimson. Dr. Kjellberg's brow furrowed, a mixture of disbelief and icy contempt in her gaze. Akina didn't flinch. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic war drum, but her voice held. It wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority that stunned the room into a momentary, shocked silence. He's not crashing from systemic failure. It's nerve agent exposure, mimicking paralysis. You need an unconventional intubation technique, or you'll cause irreparable vocal cord trauma and lose the airway completely. Ramirez let out a humorless laugh, a harsh, dismissive sound. Nurse Jabari, this is a code situation. You're a month out of orientation. Step aside. With all due respect, Dr. Akina continued, her eyes fixed on Kaelen's deteriorating form, your current approach will fail. His vocal cords are compromised in a specific way. I know the technique. I've seen this before. She didn't elaborate on where, she didn't need to. The conviction in her voice was enough. Kjellberg interjected, her tone razor-sharp, this isn't a textbook case, nurse. And it certainly isn't a situation for untested theories from a junior staff member. We follow protocol. Protocol is killing him. Akina shot back, her voice rising slightly. She felt the eyes of every person in the room on her, the weight of their judgment, the incredulity. This was it. This was the point of no return. She was breaking every rule, risking her career, her license, everything. But looking at Kaelen, at the faint tremor of his lips, the almost imperceptible struggle for a breath that wouldn't come, she knew she had no choice. The monitor let out a long, flat tone. Kaelen's heart activity ceased. Panic flared anew, worse than before. Ramirez bellowed, defibrillator. Get ready to shock. But before he could act, Akina took another step forward. Her gaze swept over the frantic faces, landing on Dr. Jiro Tanaka, a senior resident who, unlike Ramirez and Kjellberg, still held a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Jiro had seen Akina's quiet competence, her meticulous attention to detail. He'd also seen the failure of their standard approach. Dr. Tanaka, Akina appealed directly, her voice urgent, we're losing him. We have minutes, maybe seconds. Let me try. It's a delicate, specific approach. I can do it. Jiro hesitated, his eyes darting between Akina, the flatlining monitor, and the two furious attendings. The silence that followed Akina's plea stretched, thick with the scent of fear and ozone. He saw the fire in Akina's eyes, a fierce, unwavering certainty that defied her quiet demeanor. He saw a patient dying under their conventional wisdom. He made a split-second decision that went against every instinct drilled into him by Ramirez and Kjellberg. Ramirez, Kjellberg, Jiro said, his voice strained but firm, our methods aren't working. He's flatlined. What do we have to lose? He turned to Akina. Nurse Jabari, you have 30 seconds. Tell me what you need. Akina didn't waste another second. The transformation was complete. The quiet rookie was gone. In her place stood the combat medic, decisive and focused, her mind already mapping the delicate, dangerous pathway ahead. Airway cart, stat. Smaller scope, and I need a different stylet. Quickly. Akina began to move, pushing through the stunned doctors, her hands already reaching for the equipment, taking control, fueled by a courage born of desperate need and silent trust. The chaos that had consumed the room moments before seemed to dissipate like mist under a sudden sun. Akina Jabari moved with a grace and speed that belied her previous quiet demeanor, her hands flying to the airway cart. The specified instruments, a smaller, more flexible bronchoscope than typically used for adult intubation, and a unique, pre-shaped stylet, were in her grasp almost before Jiro Tanaka finished his last word. She didn't look at Ramirez, didn't acknowledge Kjellberg's stunned silence. Her world had narrowed to the dying man on the gurney, his life force flickering, and the tools that could rekindle it. The transformation was absolute. The soft-spoken rookie was gone, replaced by a warrior whose battlefield was now a sterile operating theater. Her movements were economical, each motion precise and deliberate, honed by necessity in environments where a second's hesitation meant a life lost. She angled Kaelen's head, adjusted the lighting, and took a deep, centering breath. Her eyes, usually downcast, now held an intense, unwavering focus that dared anyone to interrupt her. Ramirez and Kjellberg, initially frozen in disbelief, slowly coalesced. Ramirez, his face a mask of furious indignation, made to step forward, to bark in order, to reclaim his authority. But Jiro, now standing protectively close to Akina, subtly shifted his weight, a silent, uncharacteristic barrier. Ramirez's gaze bounced between the decisive nurse and the junior doctor who had just defied him. Humiliation burned in his chest, but a primal, scientific curiosity, grudging and unwelcome, was beginning to stir. Kaelen was flatlined. What indeed did they have to lose? Kjellberg, ever the meticulous observer, felt a prickle of professional awe, despite her profound skepticism. She watched Akina's hands, not the frantic, fumbling movements she might expect from an inexperienced nurse attempting a complex procedure, but the fluid, confident motions of a master craftsman. Akina slid the bronchoscope into position, her head tilting, her eyes glued to the small monitor that would display the internal landscape of Kaelen's throat. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. A profound silence descended upon the room. The rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, now a flat, continuous tone, was the only sound of Kaelen's impending demise. Even the frantic whispers of the other nurses had ceased. They watched, captivated, a collective breath held tight in their lungs. Akina's brow furrowed slightly, a testament to the immense concentration required. Her fingers, usually delicate, now moved with a surprising strength and dexterity, guiding the instrument deeper, searching for the specific, nuanced anatomy she knew was there. Ramirez's jaw was clenched so tight his muscles corded. He'd seen thousands of intubations, performed hundreds himself. This was different. The angle, the tools chosen, Akina's utter lack of visible trepidation, it was all unconventional, dangerously so. Yet, a part of him, the part that lived for the impossible, couldn't look away. He expected a mistake, a slip, a catastrophic failure that would confirm his disdain. But what he saw was an unnerving, almost artistic precision. Kjellberg, the neurologist, found herself leaning forward, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she saw with what she believed. Akina wasn't just intubating, she was performing a delicate dance around a known anatomical minefield, avoiding the very structures Kjellberg knew were often damaged in typical, forceful intubations. The vocal cords, the vagus nerve, these were areas that, if mishandled, could worsen Kaelen's already dire condition. Akina seemed to navigate them with an almost uncanny intuition. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Sweat beaded on Akina's temples, not from exertion, but from the immense mental pressure. Her focus was absolute, her breath shallow and controlled. The room held its collective breath with her. Every eye was on her hands, on the small monitor, willing Kaelen's unresponsive body to show a sign of life, willing Akina to succeed against all odds. The very air vibrated with a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. The rookie nurse, once overlooked, now commanded the absolute, undivided attention of an entire elite medical team, her hands literally holding a man's life in their grasp. She pushed deeper, the unique stylet now serving as her guide, feeling for a pathway that only her hidden knowledge could discern. Her movements were slow, painstaking, but unwavering. There was no room for error. The patient's life, and arguably Akina's career, hung in the balance, suspended over the delicate, trembling line of a single, precise decision. Akina's fingers, steady as a surgeon's, made the final, crucial adjustment. There was a faint, almost imperceptible click as the specialized intubation tube, guided by the unique stylet she'd chosen, settled into place. It wasn't the sound of steel on steel, but a soft, tactile confirmation that only someone with her specific, battle-hardened experience would recognize, the exact, delicate engagement with the vocal cords, bypassing the inflamed, vulnerable tissue. She removed the stylet with a practiced fluidity, then secured the tube with a swift, confident motion. The room, which had been holding its breath as one, exhaled in a collective, ragged gasp. It wasn't a triumphant cheer, not yet, but the release of an almost unbearable tension. Every pair of eyes snapped to the vital signs monitor. For a heart-stopping second, the numbers flickered, hesitant. Then, with a sudden, beautiful surge, Kaelen's oxygen saturation began to climb. The flat line on the cardiac monitor, which had held everyone captive in its chilling stillness, bounced back to a rhythmic, steady pulse. A wave of sound washed over the room, not shouts, but murmurs, choked exclamations of disbelief and overwhelming relief. Dr. Tanaka, who had been leaning forward, rigid with apprehension, slumped back against the wall, a strangled sob escaping his lips. He pressed a hand over his mouth, his eyes wide and glistening, staring at Akina with a reverence that bordered on awe. Dr. Ramirez, who had been poised to intervene, his face a mask of furious skepticism, stood frozen. His jaw hung slightly agape, his brow furrowed in a profound mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. Dr. Kjellberg, typically so composed, had unconsciously clasped her hands over her chest, her knuckles white. Her gaze darted from the steadily improving monitor to Akina, then back again, as if trying to reconcile the impossible with the possible. The rigid lines of her face softened, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator, now properly delivering oxygen to Kaelen's lungs, filled the sudden, almost sacred silence. It was the sound of life returning, a counterpoint to the hurried whispers and the ragged breaths of the medical team. Kaelen's chest began to rise and fall with a shallow but steady rhythm, the gray pallor of his skin slowly, miraculously, giving way to a healthier flush. Akina, her own body now screaming with the accumulated stress of minutes that felt like hours, allowed herself a single, deep breath. The raw, searing adrenaline began to recede, leaving her limbs heavy, her mind buzzing with a quiet, profound exhaustion. She stepped back from the bed, her eyes still fixed on Kaelen, watching for every minuscule sign of improvement. She hadn't expected praise, didn't seek it. Her reward was simply Kaelen's breathing, the slow, steady beat of his heart. Ramirez was the first to move, albeit hesitantly. He approached the monitor, peering at the numbers as if they might change, then ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of bewildered exasperation that bled into awe. I don't understand, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. It's stable. His sats are normalizing. His voice, usually booming with authority, was hushed, almost reverent. Kjellberg, still rooted to her spot, simply nodded, a slow, disbelieving movement. The vocal cords, the tremor, it was exactly as she described, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A nerve agent, mimicking paralysis, a specific technique. The realization dawned on her face, stark and undeniable. The scientific rigor she prided herself on now affirmed the impossible. Dr. Tanaka, no longer able to contain himself, took a step towards Akina, his voice thick with emotion. Akina, you did it. You really did it. There was an unspoken apology in his eyes, a recognition of his earlier doubts, and an overwhelming gratitude for her unwavering conviction. Akina offered a small, tired smile, a flicker of her usual quiet demeanor returning. The weight of Grandview's hierarchy, its skepticism, its rigid adherence to established norms, had tried to crush her. But her hidden knowledge, her experience forged in fire, had not only saved a life but had shattered preconceptions. Then, as if drawn by the collective shift in the room's energy, Kaelen's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, they lifted. His eyes, though still clouded with pain and exhaustion, met Akina's. There was no need for words. In that shared gaze, a profound understanding passed between them, a quiet thank you, a shared memory of a different kind of battlefield, and the unspoken acknowledgement of a life saved against all odds. Akina's journey from overlooked rookie to respected expert had, in this moment, irrevocably begun. She had faced down an impossible medical mystery and the entrenched arrogance of an elite institution, and she had emerged victorious. Her quiet bravery had spoken volumes. The sterile air of the ICU, moments ago thick with panic and the scent of adrenaline, now thrummed with a different kind of energy, stunned silence, then a collective, relieved exhalation. Dr. Santiago Ramirez, chief surgeon, stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. The confident, almost arrogant lines around his mouth had softened into an slack-jawed expression, his eyes wide and unfocused as they stared at Kaelen's steadily rising oxygen saturation on the monitor. Beside him, Dr. Ingrid Kjellberg, head of neurology, looked equally undone. Her usual composed, protocol-driven demeanor had evaporated, replaced by a subtle tremor in her hands as she lowered her chart. The rigid hierarchy of Grandview Medical Center, so carefully constructed and fiercely maintained, had just been rattled to its core by a rookie nurse. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions, with shattered assumptions. It was Dr. Jiro Tanaka, the resident who had granted Akina the precious seconds she needed, who broke the spell. He stepped forward, a profound mixture of awe and professional respect in his gaze as he looked at Akina. "Akina," he began, his voice hoarse, that was incredible. The precision, the speed. I've never seen anything like it. And the vocal cords, how did you know to even look for that specific tremor, let alone execute such a delicate intubation on the fly?" His praise was genuine, a bomb in the charged atmosphere, and it wasn't just for her skill, but for her courage to act. Akina, still catching her breath, simply offered a quiet, tired smile. Her focus remained on Kaelen, her eyes scanning the readouts, confirming the stabilization. He was showing signs that matched a very specific type of neurotoxin exposure I've encountered, she explained softly, her voice still a little shaky. It requires a modified approach to avoid further trauma. Normal intubation would have likely done more harm. She didn't elaborate, didn't boast. Her humility was as profound as her skill. Just then, the double doors of the ICU slid open, and a small group of people rushed in, their faces etched with a raw, desperate hope. Kaelen's family. His mother, a woman with silver braids and eyes that held generations of quiet strength, led the way, followed by his older sister and a younger man, perhaps a cousin. Their eyes immediately locked onto Kaelen, then swept across the medical team, searching for answers. Panic flared anew in the mother's eyes, until she saw the steady rise and fall of Kaelen's chest, the serene rhythm of the ventilator, and the calm green numbers on the screen. Jiro, sensing the moment, stepped forward to greet them. "Mrs. Nez, we have good news," he said gently, his voice thick with relief. "Sergeant Nez is stable. His breathing has been secured, and his vitals are improving." The relief that washed over the family was almost tangible. Mrs. Nez gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her sister began to sob quietly, while the young man slumped against the wall, head bowed, overcome. Then, Mrs. Nez looked up, her gaze falling on Akina, who stood quietly beside Kaelen's bed, her presence almost blending into the background. Who is this kind nurse?" Mrs. Nez asked, her voice trembling. Jiro gestured towards Akina. "This is Nurse Jabari, Mrs. Nez. It was her quick thinking, her unique expertise, that saved your son tonight." Mrs. Nez, her eyes still brimming with tears, walked directly to Akina. She didn't speak, but reached out, taking Akina's hands in her own. Her grip was firm, warm, and utterly sincere. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Thank you. I felt like we were losing him." The quiet dignity of her gratitude was profound, an emotional validation that resonated deeper than any professional commendation. Akina met her gaze, a profound empathy reflected in her own eyes. "He's a fighter, Mrs. Nez," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet respect. "He never gave up." As the family huddled around Kaelen, offering whispered prayers and gentle touches, Dr. Ramirez, still visibly shaken, cleared his throat. He approached Akina, his previous arrogance replaced by a strained formality. "Nurse Jabari," he began, a reluctant admiration creeping into his tone. "That was an extraordinary intervention. We were at a loss. Where, may I ask, did you acquire such specialized knowledge of this specific neurological presentation and unorthodox intubation technique?" Akina paused, her gaze drifting back to Kaelen, a flicker of distant, difficult memories in her eyes. "My experience comes from the field, doctor," she answered, her voice even, though tinged with the weight of her past. "I worked as a combat medic in East African conflict zones. Nerve agent exposure, unusual toxins mimicking other conditions, they were unfortunately common. Standard protocols often weren't enough. We had to adapt, innovate, or we lost people." Her words hung in the air, transforming the perception of her in an instant. She wasn't just a quiet rookie, she was a survivor, a veteran of a different kind of war, her humility a testament to the horrors she had witnessed and overcome. The revelation wasn't just about qualifications, it was about the very fabric of who Akina was, a person forged in the crucible of extreme need, driven by a deep, unwavering commitment to preserving life, utterly devoid of ego. The quiet, observant nurse was now seen for what she truly was, a profoundly experienced, incredibly brave individual whose expertise, though hidden, was invaluable. A new respect, not just for her skill but for her very being, settled upon the room. The question of her future at Grandview, once precarious, now seemed undeniably bright, redefined by her extraordinary past. The aftermath for Dr. Santiago Ramirez and Dr. Ingrid Kjellberg was not a public shaming, but a far more insidious and lasting form of professional reckoning. The hospital administration, while discreet, conducted a thorough internal review. They weren't stripped of their positions, but the incident hung over them like a shroud. Dr. Ramirez, whose boundless self-confidence had bordered on arrogance, found himself facing a silence from his peers far more chilling than any reprimand. The deference that had once been automatic was now replaced with a subtle, watchful scrutiny. He still commanded the oar, but the easy camaraderie and unquestioning trust from his residents had fractured. He began to second-guess himself, a foreign and uncomfortable sensation. The weight of almost losing Kaelen, not due to medical complexity but due to his own dismissiveness, slowly began to chip away at his hardened ego. He found himself studying Akina from afar, a flicker of something akin to respect, or perhaps grudging acknowledgement, replacing his former disdain. Dr. Kjellberg, whose world revolved around established protocols and empirical data, struggled even more. Her scientific mind had rejected Akina's theory as anecdotal and unproven, yet Akina had been unequivocally right. This intellectual defeat forced her to confront the limitations of her own rigid framework. She started attending grand rounds with a new attentiveness, occasionally asking questions about unconventional approaches or rare presentations, a stark contrast to her usual pronouncements from the top of her specialty. There was a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in their demeanor, a tempering of their previously unshakable authority. They might not have voiced an apology to Akina directly, but their actions, subtle yet profound, began to speak louder. They were learning. The incident had served as a harsh, necessary lesson in humility and the vast, often unexplored, frontiers of medical knowledge. Meanwhile, Sergeant Kaelen Nez's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to Akina's courage and insight. Within days, the paralysis began to recede, his breathing strong and steady. The specialized intubation had not only saved his life but had also prevented further damage, paving the way for a more complete recovery. Akina spent extra time at his bedside, checking on him even when her shift was over. One afternoon, as she adjusted his pillow, Kaelen's eyes fluttered open. His gaze, though still hazy, found hers. A weak smile touched his lips. "Sergeant," he rasped, his voice fragile but clear, the same word that had empowered her in his darkest hour. Akina's own eyes welled up. She simply squeezed his hand, a silent promise of care and connection passing between them. His journey to full rehabilitation would be long, but it was a journey Akina had ensured he would live to take. Akina's life at Grandview Medical Center was utterly transformed. The whispers still followed her, but now they were of admiration and awe, not quiet dismissal. Colleagues sought her out, not for small talk, but for genuine consultations, respecting her unique perspective. Dr. Tanaka, who had quietly supported her, became a trusted confidant, often seeking her input on difficult cases. Akina remained Akina, quiet, observant, humble, but her quietness was no longer mistaken for weakness or inexperience. It was now understood as a testament to her deep focus and profound wisdom. She was no longer just a rookie nurse, she was a revered expert, an invaluable asset, her combat medic experience now openly acknowledged as a vital part of Grandview's diverse tapestry of knowledge. She found herself mentoring younger nurses, not through formal lectures, but through her unwavering presence and astute observations. This was Akina's authentic life, finally lived in the light. The burden of hidden expertise, the fear of judgment, had lifted. She could bring her whole self to her calling, a quiet force for good, a guardian of life. The experience solidified her belief in listening to the unseen, trusting one's instincts, and the profound value of every unique human experience. Grandview had been a proving ground, and Akina had emerged not just victorious, but truly, deeply herself. Her journey stood as a powerful reminder that true growth often lies beyond the visible, beyond titles and hierarchies, and the quiet strength of conviction and the courage to act on what is right. It was a testament to the enduring hope that even in the most rigid systems, a single, brave voice could ignite lasting change, fostering a more compassionate and open-minded future for all. Akina's journey reminds us that true strength often lies in quiet conviction and the courage to act when others falter. It's a testament to the unseen heroes among us and the power of embracing our unique gifts. What unique strength have you discovered within yourself? Share your thoughts below. If Akina's inspiring story resonated with you, please subscribe to join our growing global community. Your support helps us create more compelling narratives like this one. Thank you so warmly for watching and being an invaluable part of our journey. Together, we celebrate the triumph of the human spirit.